They move quietly across the shifting plains of an ice age world. The climate is unstable, locked in a rhythm of cold advances and brief interludes of warmth, and both Neanderthals and their human relatives live within its cycles. Vast corridors of grassland stretch from the Atlantic coast into the heart of Eurasia, broken by belts of conifer forest and windswept tundra. Here, survival depends on fire, stone, and the bonds of community. The Neanderthals emerge hundreds of thousands of years earlier, descending from an ancestral population that left Africa long before Homo sapiens began their own long journey outward. By the time modern humans set foot in Eurasia, Neanderthals are already established, adapted to landscapes that shift with ice and thaw. Their world extends from the limestone caves of Iberia, across the plains of France and Germany, through the Carpathians, into the Russian steppe, and as far east as the Altai Mountains of Siberia. Fossils and tools found across this wide range confirm their resilience and persistence even as glaciers advance and retreat. Each site tells of communities that return again and again to particular valleys, rivers, and hunting grounds. A lesser-known record survives in the coastal cliffs of northern France. At La Roselle, archaeologists uncover more than 200 footprints pressed into fine sediments some 80,000 years ago. Preserved by chance under layers of sand, they reveal the presence of a small group: adults, adolescents, and children. The tracks give more than proof of existence. They hint at movement through a single moment, the weight of bodies in soft ground, the proximity of generations traveling together. Such fragile traces are rare, yet they remain some of the most direct evidence of Neanderthal presence in a landscape now reshaped by tides and storms. The scale of their world is shaped by ice. During glacial peaks, sea levels fall by more than 100 meters, exposing coastal plains where rivers wander far beyond today's shores. These submerged lands, now hidden beneath the North Sea or the Mediterranean, once provide hunting grounds and passageways linking groups across continents. When ice retreats, the waters rise and coastlines advance inland, covering campsites, hearths, and pathways. Planetary cycles of freezing and thaw determine where game herds migrate and where people can follow. Across these landscapes, stone tools accumulate layer upon layer. Flint, chert, and quartzite are struck into sharp flakes, and point tools, suited for butchering, scraping hides, and shaping wood. In some caves, deep stratigraphy records thousands of years of repeated visits. Bones of bison horse and red deer mingle with hearth ash, showing the persistence of hunting traditions. Archaeologists note not only the presence of tools, but the skill with which Neanderthals choose raw materials from distant outcrops, carrying them across many kilometers. This movement of stone hints at networks of mobility and the memory of favored places. Yet mysteries endure. One puzzle remains: the exact nature of the interactions between Neanderthals and earlier waves of archaic humans. Genetic studies show that Neanderthals themselves carry ancestry from an even earlier dispersal out of Africa, yet the fossil record offers few clear moments of overlap. Did these populations meet, exchange tools, or compete for the same territories? The evidence is fragmentary, and researchers continue to debate whether the Neanderthals' own lineage was shaped by repeated migrations or by long isolation in Europe's shifting refuges. The uncertainty leaves gaps in the map of early human presence. As glaciers grow, the weight of ice depresses entire land masses. Northern Europe bends under sheets more than a kilometer thick. Winds sweep across exposed plains, carrying loess and dust far to the south, depositing fine blankets of silt across valleys that later support grassland and much later still farming. The very planet reshapes under the cycles of climate, with coastlines expanding outward during glacial maxima and rivers carving new courses through cold, barren floodplains. Life in such an environment requires resilience. Neanderthals developed robust bodies, barrel chests, and strong limbs adaptations that help conserve heat in frigid winters. They are hunters of large mammals, but also opportunists gathering plants and shellfish when available. Their presence in Gibraltar's caves, where marine shells and evidence of fire are found, demonstrates an ability to exploit coastal resources as well as inland game. Each discovery adds nuance to the portrait of a species long thought simple, but now recognized as versatile. In the quiet measure of time, the spread of hominins across the continents becomes visible, not in dramatic leaps, but in steady persistence. From the gravel terraces of the Rhone to the banks of the Don traces accumulate stone edges dulled by use, cut marks on animal bone charcoal blackening the roof of caves. The archaeological record is sparse compared to the vastness of the world it represents, yet these fragments are enough to anchor a narrative of survival stretching across hundreds of millennia. As the first section closes, the image that lingers is one of footprints pressed into soft sediment, a fragile moment of life preserved in stone. They testify not only to movement, but to presence, to families walking together in landscapes now lost. Against the planetary scale of ice advance and retreat, these human traces are fleeting. Yet they endure long enough for us to find them connecting modern eyes to ancient travelers across the cold plains of the Ice Age. In the forests and steppes of Ice Age Europe, the shape of Neanderthal life becomes visible in fragments of bone stone and shelter. Their bodies carry the signature of adaptation to a demanding world: broad torsos, short but powerful limbs, and large noses that help warm cold air before it enters the lungs. These physical features are not accidents of evolution, but responses to long glacial winters and fluctuating climates. They endure in conditions where survival demands both strength and knowledge of place. Fossil remains from sites such as La Ferracie in France and Shanidar in Iraq record a population that is widespread, resilient, and diverse in habit. In caves across southern France, hearths mark their presence in repeating layers. The darkened stone ceilings still hold traces of soot, showing that fire is not only used for warmth, but maintained over generations. Charred bones of red deer and aurochs reveal diets built on large mammals, yet isotopic studies add complexity, pointing to varied foods that include plants, fungi, and occasionally aquatic resources. The breadth of subsistence demonstrates versatility, contradicting older images of Neanderthals as rigid specialists. A lesser-known discovery lies at Bruniquel Cave in southwest France, where deep within the dark zone 200 meters from the entrance, Neanderthals break stalagmites and arrange them into circular structures some 175,000 years ago. These stone rings blackened with fire residue stand as one of the oldest known constructions in human history. Their purpose is still uncertain, but their deliberate arrangement implies planning, cooperation, and a familiarity with the subterranean world. In the quiet of this deep cavern, they leave behind an enduring puzzle about what drove them to build in the dark. Their settlements are varied, ranging from caves and rock shelters to open-air sites on river terraces. At some locations, windbreaks of stone and wood provide protection against the cold. Evidence of repeated seasonal use suggests a rhythm of mobility. Groups move, with migrating game return to known shelters, and pass knowledge of these places through generations. The materials they use reflect not only local geology, but also the extent of their travels. In Central Europe, stone from sources over 100 kilometers away appears in toolkits indicating either wide-ranging movement or exchange between groups. The tools themselves evolve within the Mysterian tradition, marked by the careful preparation of cores to strike predictable flakes. Scrapers' points and denticulated edges serve tasks of hide processing, woodworking, and hunting. Hafting technology, binding stone to wood with natural adhesives like birch tar, reflects ingenuity. At Königsauer in Germany, lumps of birch tar survive as some of the earliest known synthetic adhesives produced by heating bark in oxygen-poor conditions. This ability to transform raw material through controlled fire suggests technical knowledge passed along carefully within communities. Yet many aspects of their lives remain unresolved. One enduring mystery concerns the scale of their social groups. Footprint sites, cave occupations, and genetic evidence suggest small communities, but the exact size and organization are debated. Did extended families form the primary unit, or did multiple groups gather periodically for exchange and mating? Ancient DNA studies reveal signs of inbreeding in some individuals, pointing to isolated populations, while other genomes show connections across distant regions. The true social fabric of Neanderthal life is still partially hidden, glimpsed only in scattered data. Planetary forces shape the horizons of their existence. As ice sheets advance, forests contract and grasslands spread, pushing game animals into new ranges. Cold phases force populations southward into refugia, while warmer interglacials open corridors to the north. These oscillations occur on scales of tens of thousands of years, yet within them, communities adapt generation by generation, adjusting their strategies to local shifts in vegetation and prey. The survival of Neanderthals across hundreds of millennia is testimony to their ability to navigate these immense cycles of climate. In Iberia, Neanderthals persist in isolated pockets long after other regions see their disappearance. Caves in Gibraltar yield evidence of late survival, hearthstone tools and butchered remains of ibex and seal dating to around 40,000 years ago. These sites perched above the sea suggest a people capable of enduring at the margins of a continent as climates shift and Homo sapiens expand. The persistence of these last groups raises questions about the varied landscapes that allow some populations to endure longer than others. Among their tools and shelters, occasional objects hint at symbolic behavior. Pigments of red ochre and black manganese dioxide appear in some cave contexts, sometimes associated with work surfaces or bone fragments. Whether these represent body decoration, functional use as fire accelerants, or markings with symbolic meaning remains debated. The ambiguity is characteristic of the Neanderthal record, tantalizing glimpses without full clarity. Archaeologists continue to weigh whether such finds signal cognitive abilities similar to modern humans or practical applications shaped by necessity. The continuity of their existence is written in bones weathered by time. From Krapina in Croatia to Vindija Cave, skeletal remains show both the marks of life strain and the traces of care. Healed fractures, degenerative joint disease, and the survival of individuals with impairments imply social support within groups. These bodies speak of a life lived close to the edge of endurance, yet they also testify to bonds that extend beyond individual survival. When viewed on the planetary canvas, the Neanderthal story is one of persistence against cycles of glacial pressure, volcanic eruptions, and shifting habitats. Their range expands and contracts as ice dictates coastlines and corridors, but for hundreds of thousands of years they maintain a presence across Eurasia. The contrast between fleeting generations and the vast timescales of Earth's climate underscores the tenuousness of survival. Yet their presence in caves on plains and along coasts confirms their deep entanglement with the changing planet. As this section concludes, the outline of Neanderthal life appears both rugged and intricate bodies shaped by cold tools, crafted with skill shelters, adapted to landscape and networks that stretch across continents. Beneath the steady cycle of firelight and hunting grounds lies a species navigating a world far larger than themselves. They are not frozen relics, but active participants in the rhythms of Earth, carrying traditions through deep time, their traces waiting to be uncovered layer by layer in the soils of Europe and Asia. Across the expanse of late Pleistocene Eurasia, the paths of Homo sapiens and Neanderthals converge. Modern humans, having moved gradually out of Africa, reach lands already occupied for hundreds of millennia by their close relatives. The meeting of these populations is not marked by a single moment, but by a series of contacts unfolding across tens of thousands of years. Archaeological layers and genetic data together reveal a pattern of coexistence, overlap, and exchange that is subtle yet enduring. In caves from France to the Levant, both species leave tools within the same strata, suggesting alternating use of sites or, at times, shared landscapes. The traces of their encounters survive not only in stone, but within the genome of every living person outside Africa. Genetic studies demonstrate that between 1 and 2% of the DNA of modern non-African humans derives from Neanderthals. This fact alone transforms our understanding of their interactions, showing that the meeting was not only ecological but biological, involving interbreeding that left a permanent imprint. The discovery of this genetic legacy in 2010 was a turning point, confirming what fossils had hinted at but could not prove. Yet the details of these unions remain unresolved. Were they rare events scattered over vast timescales, or more common in particular regions where populations overlapped for generations? Ancient DNA from individuals in Siberia and Europe reveals multiple episodes of interbreeding, some as old as 100,000 years, when early modern humans first ventured into Eurasia, and others as recent as 40,000 years, near the time of Neanderthal disappearance. The precise circumstances, whether through cooperation, exchange, or conflict, remain uncertain, leaving a mystery at the heart of human prehistory. Lesser-known evidence of close contact appears at sites where cultural traits seem to blur. At Châtel-Perronian levels in France and northern Spain, tools associated with Neanderthals show elements such as bone points and ornaments that resemble those of early Homo sapiens. Some scholars argue that Neanderthals independently developed these innovations, while others suggest influence through contact. The debate reflects the difficulty of disentangling parallel invention from cultural transmission, yet either possibility points to a dynamic world where ideas as well as genes may have been exchanged. Firelight serves as a recurring constant in these encounters. Both species use hearths for warmth and cooking, and the shared landscapes of caves may have glowed with alternating presence. While no direct evidence shows them sitting together, the sequence of occupations in the same shelters reminds us that valleys and mountains carried overlapping memories. In the Pontic steppe, in the limestone gorges of France, in the uplands of the Zagros, the two populations traverse the same corridors, tracking the same game and drinking from the same rivers. Planetary forces frame the timing of their contact. Around 60,000 years ago, global climate enters a colder phase, and grasslands expand across Eurasia. These open habitats allow herds of bison, horse, and mammoth to flourish, drawing both Neanderthals and modern humans into wide-ranging pursuits. The shifting boundaries of ice and forests dictate where populations can survive, compressing them into contact zones during harsher intervals. The vastness of the continents narrows under the pressure of climate, bringing close relatives face to face. At Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains, a remarkable genetic record deepens the story. Here Neanderthals not only meet modern humans, but also another archaic population, the Denisovans. A single bone fragment analyzed in 2018 belonged to a girl whose mother was Neanderthal and father Denisovan. This rare hybrid individual demonstrates that interbreeding between hominin groups was not an isolated event but a recurring possibility wherever ranges overlapped. The multiplicity of interactions reveals a complex network of lineages weaving through Eurasia. Each fragment of DNA recovered from fossils adds resolution to this intricate web. Yet mysteries remain at scales both intimate and broad. One unresolved question concerns the direction of advantage. Did Neanderthal DNA provide adaptive benefits to modern humans? Studies suggest that genes related to immunity, skin, and metabolism introduced by Neanderthals persist in modern populations, perhaps aiding survival in colder climates or against local pathogens. Conversely, certain Neanderthal-derived variants are linked to vulnerabilities in modern health, raising questions about long-term consequences. The balance of benefit and burden is still being investigated, and the full impact of this ancient genetic exchange continues to emerge. A planetary perspective shows how small bands of humans carry lineages across immense distances. The migration of Homo sapiens from Africa to East Asia spans more than 10,000 kilometers, a journey longer than from London to Cape Town. Within this scale, the mingling of populations is not surprising. What is striking is how enduring its legacy becomes. The presence of Neanderthal DNA in billions of people today underscores the magnitude of these encounters, even if they were rare in the moment. Lesser-known sites such as Bachokiro Cave in Bulgaria provide glimpses of early modern humans around 45,000 years ago, leaving ornaments of pierced animal teeth and stone tools distinct from the Neanderthal record. Yet in the same layers, genetic analysis reveals traces of Neanderthal ancestry, showing that within just a few generations of entering Europe, interbreeding had already occurred. These findings compress vast prehistory into intimate timelines where individuals embody the merging of lineages. In the quieter corners of the archaeological record, traces of daily life illustrate the overlap. Cut marks on reindeer bones, hearths blackened by repeated fires, and tools worn by use suggest parallel activities. Both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens follow migrating herds, exploit rivers and coasts, and shelter in caves. Their shared dependence on the rhythms of landscape underlines the closeness of their ways of life. While distinctions remain in tool styles and symbolic expression, the common ground of survival binds them to the same ecological stage. The enigma of their relationship endures. Some researchers propose competition for resources as a factor in Neanderthal decline, while others see interbreeding and assimilation as more significant. The evidence may support both. In some regions, modern humans expand as Neanderthals vanish, yet in others, their genes and perhaps even traditions are absorbed into the new arrivals. The line between replacement and continuity is blurred, shaped by the fragmentary nature of the record and the complexity of human interaction. On the planetary scale, the encounter of these two populations represents more than a fleeting episode. It is part of the long story of hominins spreading, meeting, and mingling across continents. Just as earlier dispersals carried genes into Neanderthals themselves, the later movement of Homo sapiens ensures that no lineage remains isolated. The Earth's shifting climates, coastlines, and corridors act as stage and backdrop for these exchanges, reminding us that human history is entwined with the planet's deep rhythms. As this section closes, what emerges is a vision of bonds and encounters written in both archaeology and DNA. The meeting of Neanderthals and modern humans is not a single story, but a series of convergences marked by shared landscapes, genetic exchanges, and the persistence of mystery. In the quiet measure of deep time, their legacies merge, shaping the humanity that endures today. Across the expanse of late Pleistocene Eurasia, the paths of Homo sapiens and Neanderthals converge. Modern humans, having moved gradually out of Africa, reach lands already occupied for hundreds of millennia by their close relatives. The meeting of these populations is not marked by a single moment, but by a series of contacts unfolding across tens of thousands of years. Archaeological layers and genetic data together reveal a pattern of coexistence, overlap, and exchange that is subtle yet enduring. In caves from France to the Levant, both species leave tools within the same strata, suggesting alternating use of sites, or at times shared landscapes. The traces of their encounters survive not only in stone, but within the genome of every living person outside Africa. Genetic studies demonstrate that between 1 and 2% of the DNA of modern non-African humans derives from Neanderthals. This fact alone transforms our understanding of their interactions, showing that the meeting was not only ecological, but biological, involving interbreeding that left a permanent imprint. The discovery of this genetic legacy in 2010 was a turning point, confirming what fossils had hinted at but could not prove. Yet the details of these unions remain unresolved. Were they rare events scattered over vast timescales, or more common in particular regions where populations overlapped for generations? Ancient DNA from individuals in Siberia and Europe reveals multiple episodes of interbreeding, some as old as 100,000 years, when early modern humans first ventured into Eurasia, and others as recent as 40,000 years, near the time of Neanderthal disappearance. The precise circumstances, whether through cooperation, exchange, or conflict, remain uncertain, leaving a mystery at the heart of human prehistory. Lesser-known evidence of close contact appears at sites where cultural traits seem to blur. At Châtel-Perronian levels in France and northern Spain, tools associated with Neanderthal show elements such as bone points and ornaments that resemble those of early Homo sapiens. Some scholars argue that Neanderthals independently developed these innovations, while others suggest influence through contact. The debate reflects the difficulty of disentangling parallel invention from cultural transmission, yet either possibility points to a dynamic world where ideas as well as genes may have been exchanged. Firelight serves as a recurring constant in these encounters. Both species use hearths for warmth and cooking, and the shared landscapes of caves may have glowed with alternating presence. While no direct evidence shows them sitting together, the sequence of occupations in the same shelters reminds us that valleys and mountains carried overlapping memories. In the Pontic steppe in the limestone gorges of France, in the uplands of the Zagros, the two populations traverse the same corridors, tracking the same game and drinking from the same rivers. Planetary forces frame the timing of their contact. Around 60,000 years ago, global climate enters a colder phase, and grasslands expand across Eurasia. These open habitats allow herds of bison, horse, and mammoth to flourish, drawing both Neanderthals and modern humans into wide-ranging pursuits. The shifting boundaries of ice and forest dictate where populations can survive, compressing them into contact zones during harsher intervals. The vastness of the continents narrows under the pressure of climate, bringing close relatives face to face. At Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains, a remarkable genetic record deepens the story. Here Neanderthals not only meet modern humans, but also another archaic population, the Denisovans. A single bone fragment analyzed in 2018 belonged to a girl whose mother was Neanderthal, and father Denisovan. This rare hybrid individual demonstrates that interbreeding between hominin groups was not an isolated event, but a recurring possibility wherever ranges overlapped. The multiplicity of interactions reveals a complex network of lineages weaving through Eurasia. Each fragment of DNA recovered from fossils adds resolution to this intricate web. Yet mysteries remain at scales both intimate and broad. One unresolved question concerns the direction of advantage. Did Neanderthal DNA provide adaptive benefits to modern humans? Studies suggest that genes related to immunity, skin, and metabolism introduced by Neanderthals persist in modern populations, perhaps aiding survival in colder climates or against local pathogens. Conversely, certain Neanderthal-derived variants are linked to vulnerabilities in modern health-raising questions about long-term consequences. The balance of benefit and burden is still being investigated, and the full impact of this ancient genetic exchange continues to emerge. A planetary perspective shows how small bands of humans carry lineages across immense distances. The migration of Homo sapiens from Africa to East Asia spans more than 10,000 kilometers, a journey longer than from London to Cape Town. Within this scale, the mingling of populations is not surprising. What is striking is how enduring its legacy becomes. The presence of Neanderthal DNA in billions of people today underscores the magnitude of these encounters, even if they were rare in the moment. Lesser-known sites such as Bachokiro Cave in Bulgaria provide glimpses of early modern humans around 45,000 years ago, leaving ornaments of pierced animal teeth and stone tools distinct from the Neanderthal record. Yet in the same layers, genetic analysis reveals traces of Neanderthal ancestry, showing that within just a few generations of entering Europe, interbreeding had already occurred. These findings compress vast prehistory into intimate timelines where individuals embody the merging of lineages. In the quieter corners of the archaeological record, traces of daily life illustrate the overlap. Cut marks on reindeer bones, hearths blackened by repeated fires, and tools worn by use suggest parallel activities. Both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens follow migrating herds, exploit rivers and coasts, and shelter in caves. Their shared dependence on the rhythms of landscape underlines the closeness of their ways of life. While distinctions remain in tool styles and symbolic expression, the common ground of survival binds them to the same ecological stage. The enigma of their relationship endures. Some researchers propose competition for resources as a factor in Neanderthal decline, while others see interbreeding and assimilation as more significant. The evidence may support both. In some regions, modern humans expand as Neanderthals vanish, yet in others, their genes and perhaps even traditions are absorbed into the new arrivals. The line between replacement and continuity is blurred, shaped by the fragmentary nature of the record and the complexity of human interaction. On the planetary scale, the encounter of these two populations represents more than a fleeting episode. It is part of the long story of hominins spreading, meeting, and mingling across continents. Just as earlier dispersals carried genes into Neanderthals themselves, the later movement of Homo sapiens ensures that no lineage remains isolated. The Earth's shifting climates, coastlines, and corridors act as stage and backdrop for these exchanges, reminding us that human history is entwined with the planet's deep rhythms. As this section closes, what emerges is a vision of bonds and encounters written in both archaeology and DNA. The meeting of Neanderthals and modern humans is not a single story, but a series of convergences marked by shared landscapes, genetic exchanges, and the persistence of mystery. In the quiet measure of deep time, their legacies merge, shaping the humanity that endures today. Beneath the glow of firelight, Neanderthal life holds traces of ritual intimacy and unseen meaning. Archaeological layers do not preserve emotions, yet they preserve gestures that suggest thought beyond the immediate tasks of survival. In caves scattered across Europe and Western Asia, burials emerge as some of the clearest windows into symbolic practice. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, the skeleton of an older male lies within a shallow pit, deliberately covered. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, several individuals are found in positions that imply intentional placement, one surrounded by traces of pollen that once sparked interpretations of a burial with flowers. While later analyses question whether wind or burrowing animals carried the pollen, the idea remains a reminder of the ambiguity that clings to ancient gestures. Whether or not flowers were laid, the repeated evidence of interment suggests that Neanderthals treat their dead with more than casual disposal. A lesser-known site in the Altai Mountains deepens the mystery. Okladnikov Cave, where Neanderthal remains lie among hearths and stone tools far east of their traditional range. Here, too, the positioning of bones hints at deliberation. These moments do not yet define a clear system of ritual, but they stand as markers of care, memory, or perhaps belief in continuities unseen. Alongside burials, pigments add another layer. Manganese dioxide blocks appear in cave contexts where their practical use as fire accelerants cannot be dismissed, yet others show scraping marks and deliberate shaping that point towards symbolic application. Red ochre, too, appears in small quantities, sometimes smeared on stone tools or associated with ornaments. At Cueva de los Aviones in Spain, perforated shells stained with pigments date to more than 115,000 years ago, making them among the earliest known symbolic objects in Europe. Their presence in a Neanderthal context challenges the assumption that only Homo sapiens create such ornaments. Whether worn as pendants or kept as talismans, these objects suggest an aesthetic dimension to Neanderthal life, a recognition of color and form that goes beyond function. The mystery of art deepens in the caves of Iberia. At La Pasiega, Maltravieso, and Ardalis uranium series, dating of painted motifs pushes their creation back beyond 64,000 years. Red lines, hand stencils, and abstract signs adorn the stone walls predating the arrival of modern humans in the region. If these dates hold, then Neanderthals are the authors of the earliest cave art known in Europe. The debate is ongoing, with questions of contamination and methods still raised, but the possibility remains that the flicker of torchlight once illuminated symbols painted by Neanderthal hands. In such dim chambers, marks of ochre and charcoal reach across time as whispers of thought made visible. Mysteries also surround the role of objects like eagle talons. At Krapina in Croatia, a set of white-tailed eagle claws bears cut marks and polishing consistent with stringing or wear dated to more than 100,000 years ago. The claws may have been worn as ornaments, a subtle form of display linking individuals to powerful animals. If true, such adornments suggest symbolic associations and a shared sense of meaning. Whether for status group identity or belief, these traces hint at inner lives now mostly hidden. On a planetary scale, these symbolic gestures unfold against dramatic backdrops of climate instability. Intervals of warming and cooling shift ecosystems with regularity, altering the availability of prey and raw materials. Yet in these conditions, Neanderthals find time and reason to create, to bury, to decorate. Their symbolic actions are not isolated from environment, but embedded within it, acts of continuity in worlds of change. A red handprint or a buried body reflects resilience against the erasures of time and ice. Firelight itself becomes both tool and symbol. In deep caves such as brunicle torches illuminate spaces where circles of broken stalagmites are arranged. The blackened ends testify to flame carried far beyond daylight's reach. Whether these constructions are ritual social gathering or simple shelter, their placement in total darkness suggests an engagement with realms not directly tied to subsistence. Such acts mark a boundary between practical survival and something more enduring. Another lesser-known detail emerges at El Cedrón in Spain, where bones of a Neanderthal group show cut marks indicating possible cannibalism. While at first glance grim, this evidence may represent survival practice during famine or a ritualized act we cannot yet decode. The ambiguity exemplifies the difficulty of reading intentions from fragments. Here, too, the mystery remains unresolved. Were these desperate acts of necessity, or did they hold symbolic meaning in their own context? The debate continues, balancing interpretation between ecology and culture. Genetic evidence occasionally intersects with these questions. Analysis of DNA from remains in El Cedrón reveals kinship ties among the group, showing that family members lived and died together. Such studies allow glimpses into intimate bonds that burials and ornaments only hint at. The genetic closeness of these groups reinforces the sense of small, tightly knit communities where social life is not only about survival, but about continuity of lineage and memory. The scale of Earth's processes provides a stark contrast. While Neanderthals' shape pigments bury their dead and adorn themselves with shells or talons, glaciers advance and retreat overhead, seas fall and rise, and continents tremble with volcanic eruptions. Around 40,000 years ago, the eruption of Italy's Campanian ignimbrite covers much of Europe in ash-reshaping ecosystems. These planetary events impose challenges beyond human scale, yet within them, symbolic gestures continue. A handprint on a wall endures even as climates shift. In the stillness of caves, whispers of red and black pigment outlast glaciers. As the section draws to a close, what emerges is not a definitive portrait, but an outline filled with unresolved mysteries. Neanderthals bury their dead, but we cannot be certain what they believe. They paint or mark caves, but we cannot know what their symbols mean. They adorn themselves with shells or talons, but we cannot reconstruct the emotions these objects hold. What is certain is that they engage in acts not strictly necessary for survival, gestures that point to imagination, memory, and meaning. In the quiet glow of firelight under the weight of Ice Age skies, their rituals and creations ripple outward through time, leaving us fragments of an unseen interior world. The record of Neanderthals draws toward its conclusion in scattered echoes across Eurasia. For hundreds of thousands of years they thrive in forests, steppes, and coasts, enduring cycles of ice and warmth, adapting bodies and tools to shifting environments. Yet by 40,000 years ago, their presence begins to fade, leaving behind a silence in places once filled with hearth smoke and hunting parties. The reasons remain complex, woven from climate competition and assimilation, and no single cause suffices to explain their disappearance. In some regions, such as the Iberian Peninsula, Neanderthals linger longer, persisting in Gibraltar's caves, while much of Europe already holds Homo sapiens. Here, stone tools and hearths dated to around 39,000 years ago reveal late survival at the edge of a shrinking range. The Rock of Gibraltar, standing at the entrance to the Mediterranean, becomes one of the final refuges where Neanderthal life continues against the encroaching presence of new populations. Lesser-known evidence comes from the Caucasus, where Mezmaiskaya Cave preserves remains of a Neanderthal infant buried some 40,000 years ago. The child's bones, covered with ochre, represent one of the last direct testimonies of their kind. This poignant detail captures both continuity of symbolic practice and the nearness of extinction. In the fading light of their history, Neanderthals remain capable of care and meaning, even as their numbers dwindle. Mysteries persist around the nature of their decline. Some researchers suggest that the eruption of the Campanian ignimbrite in Italy around 39,000 years ago devastates ecosystems across Europe, reducing game and altering vegetation. Others emphasize the role of modern humans, whose expanding populations bring new technologies, broader social networks, and greater adaptability. Genetic evidence indicates that Neanderthal groups are small, often isolated, and sometimes marked by inbreeding vulnerabilities that may compound the pressures of climate and competition. Yet assimilation also plays a role. Interbreeding leaves traces of Neanderthal ancestry in nearly all modern populations outside Africa, showing that extinction is not absolute but partial, transformed through absorption. On a planetary scale, the disappearance of Neanderthals occurs during dramatic environmental change. Ice sheets advance again, sea levels fall, and Europe becomes a patchwork of cold, steppe and dwindling forests. Vast herds migrate across plains, but resources fluctuate, demanding resilience and mobility. Homo sapiens, with wider social networks and innovations in symbolic communication, may have held advantages in coordinating larger groups and maintaining connections over distance. In such conditions, the balance tips and Neanderthals vanish as a distinct population, while their genes persist in others. The legacies they leave are not only genetic. Stone tools in stratified cave layers record their skill in shaping flakes and scrapers with precision. Pigmented shells and carved eagle talons point to aesthetic expression. Burials testify to care for the dead. Even after their disappearance, these traces remain embedded in the landscapes of Europe and Asia, reminders of lives lived in parallel with ours. The endurance of their DNA within modern humans ensures that Neanderthals are not wholly lost, but continue as part of the shared human lineage. A lesser-known legacy resides in the influence of their immune adaptations. Variants inherited from Neanderthals affect how modern humans respond to pathogens, some conferring protection, others linked to susceptibility to certain conditions. These genetic threads, carried quietly within billions of people, testify to ancient encounters that shape health and survival today. The scale of this inheritance is planetary, stretching across continents where Homo sapiens spread and carrying Neanderthal contributions into distant future populations. One enduring mystery is how much cultural knowledge may also have passed between species. Did Homo sapiens adopt techniques of stoneworking, hunting strategies, or symbolic practices from Neanderthals? The archaeological record offers tantalizing overlaps, but certainty is elusive. The blending of traditions in regions of contact makes it difficult to assign clear origins. Still, the possibility that ideas as well as genes were exchanged reinforces the notion of continuity rather than absolute division. The final disappearance of Neanderthals reminds us of the fragility of human life against the vast backdrop of planetary change. Glaciers carve valleys, seas rise and fall, and ecosystems shift with relentless rhythm while small groups of humans struggle to persist. Against this immensity, even resilient species may fade. Yet the persistence of their traces, footprints in coastal sands, pigments in caves, fragments of DNA within us, ensures that they are not erased. In the stillness of deep time, they remain companions in the human story. The epilogue of their existence unfolds, slowly, marked not by sudden catastrophe, but by gradual retreat. Caves once lit by their fires fall silent, then later hold the smoke of new arrivals. Valleys once traversed by their hunting parties become pathways for others. The transition is not abrupt, but layered with moments of overlap, interbreeding, and coexistence before the final absence. Their story does not end in complete extinction, but in transformation, their line carried onward in altered form. On the planetary canvas, the arc of Neanderthal existence stretches long and deep. From their emergence more than 400,000 years ago to their fading presence 40,000 years ago, they survive for a span far greater than the entire history of agriculture and civilization among modern humans. Their endurance measured against shifting ice sheets and changing climates speaks to adaptability and persistence. Their disappearance set against the same forces underscores vulnerability. Both truths coexist within their story. As the narrative settles, what remains is a quiet recognition. Neanderthals are not distant curiosities, but relatives whose lives intersect our own in body and memory. Their traces endure in the red ochre on a shell, the cut marks on an eagle talon, the sequence of genes in our cells. They remind us that humanity has always been plural, shaped by meetings, minglings, and extinctions. In their vanishing, they leave us both questions and legacies, mysteries unresolved, and inheritances undeniable. In the final stillness, the story of Neanderthals becomes part of the larger human continuum, woven into the fabric of our species and preserved in the landscapes they once called home. When the Neanderthals vanish as a distinct lineage, the world does not pause. Homo sapiens continue to expand into landscapes once shared, carrying with them not only their own traditions, but also the echoes of contact with other humans. What remains of Neanderthals is dispersed across different scales in stone and pigment, in DNA within our bodies, and in questions that resist final answers. This continuation becomes less a story of loss and more a story of absorption into the larger fabric of humanity. On the genetic level, Neanderthal ancestry persists quietly. Modern populations across Europe and Asia carry fragments of their DNA, different segments distributed unevenly across regions. Some of these fragments influence immunity, others affect skin and hair, and some remain neutral passengers from the deep past. The pattern resembles a mosaic. Billions of living people each carry small parts of Neanderthal heritage, none carrying it whole. In this way, Neanderthals are not gone but scattered through time, present in a form both invisible and enduring. Lesser-known studies reveal surprising subtleties in this legacy. For example, in the Tibetan Plateau, a gene variant that aids adaptation to high altitude descends from Denisovans, another archaic population related to Neanderthals. This detail underscores the broader point: humanity is not a single unbroken line, but a web of interwoven threads. Neanderthals are one of those threads, their inheritance overlapping with others to form the diversity of modern humans. Their disappearance as a distinct group is real, yet their presence within us continues as part of a wider hominin network. Archaeologically, their memory is preserved in the enduring marks they leave upon landscapes. Caves such as La Chapelle au Saint-Chanidar and Vindesia remain focal points for study, each new excavation refining our understanding. Traces of pigment on shells, cut marks on eagle talons, and circular constructions in Bruniquel continue to spark debate. Some researchers see in these traces evidence of symbolic life, close to that of Homo sapiens. Others caution that we project too much meaning onto scant remains. The unresolved mystery lies in interpretation: how much of Neanderthal life is accessible through fragments and how much is forever beyond reach. Planetary change frames their story in a way that places it within a broader rhythm. Ice ages advance and retreat with slow inevitability, shaping coastlines, river systems, and ecosystems. Neanderthals endure for hundreds of thousands of years, their timeline stretching across multiple glacial cycles. In this context, the arrival of Homo sapiens and the blending of lineages become one episode in a much larger pattern. The Earth itself is the stage, and humans are brief actors within its vast cycles. To view Neanderthals only through the lens of disappearance risks missing their greater significance. They are not an anomaly but a reminder that human history is plural. For much of prehistory, more than one kind of human shares the planet. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, and Homo sapiens all exist within overlapping time frames. Only recently has our species become the sole survivor. This plurality is important. It shows that what we call humanity is shaped by encounters, convergences, and exchanges across different groups. A lesser-known reflection comes from tools in the Châtel-Perronian tradition. These artifacts blending features of Neanderthal and early Homo sapiens industries may represent the creative outcome of cultural contact. Whether invented independently or influenced by neighbors, they blur boundaries and remind us that categories imposed by archaeology may not have been felt as divisions in prehistory. They are signs of a world where ideas as well as genes move across groups. The planetary perspective deepens when considering what followed. Homo sapiens go on to occupy every continent except Antarctica, developing farming cities and civilizations. In contrast, Neanderthals remain tied to Eurasia, their lifeways consistent for hundreds of millennia. Yet longevity itself is an achievement. They survive far longer than many later cultures or empires. Their endurance across glacial upheavals stands as a testament to adaptation. Their disappearance, when set against that endurance, emphasizes the delicate balance between persistence and vulnerability in human history. One unresolved mystery continues to haunt the record. Did Neanderthals possess language? Their hyoid bones, ear structures, and genetic markers suggest the capacity for speech, but no direct evidence of syntax or vocabulary remains. If they spoke, what did their voices sound like beneath the cavern ceilings or in the open steppe? This question, unanswerable in full, captures the essence of prehistory's limits. We can trace bones and pigments, but the sound of their words, if they had them, is beyond recovery. The silence of the record stands in contrast to the possibility of voices once carried on Ice Age winds. On the largest scale, the story of Neanderthals joins the longer arc of evolution. They emerge, persist, mingle, and transform within the same currents that shape all life. Species arise and vanish, yet leave traces in those that follow. Just as Neanderthals carry within them ancestry from earlier hominins, so too do we carry them within ourselves. The continuum is unbroken even when distinct forms disappear. To recognize Neanderthals is to acknowledge that humanity has never been singular, but always a tapestry. As this added section settles, the perspective expands beyond disappearance toward continuity. Neanderthals live on in fragments of DNA, in tools and pigments, and in the questions we continue to ask. They live on in the understanding that humanity is not fixed, but evolving, shaped by contact and by climate, by survival and by meaning. Against the planetary backdrop of shifting ice and rising seas, their presence remains part of the larger story of life on Earth. The stillness they leave behind is not emptiness, but resonance, a reminder that what endures is not only survival, but memory carried forward in bodies, landscapes, and wonder. The traces of Neanderthals continue to reverberate not only in our genomes, but also in the landscapes they once knew. Each excavation adds to the picture, but also enlarges the silence that surrounds them. What comes after their disappearance is the steady spread of Homo sapiens into every corner of Eurasia, carrying with them cultural traditions, art, and technologies that flourish across changing climates. Yet beneath this expansion lies the memory of coexistence with others, a reminder that modern humans are not alone in shaping the story of prehistory. The legacy of Neanderthal becomes visible in unexpected ways. Genes inherited from them influence how the human body responds to sunlight, to pathogens, and to altitude. Some variants affect skin pigmentation and hair texture, others shape immune defenses, and a few are linked to modern vulnerabilities. This mixture of benefit and burden illustrates the long reach of encounters tens of thousands of years past. It is not only survival that is passed forward, but the consequences of adaptation. Every breath in high latitudes, every immune response to unfamiliar diseases carries faint echoes of Neanderthal inheritance. A lesser-known aspect of their legacy appears in studies of the human brain. Certain genetic variants associated with Neanderthal ancestry are linked to differences in neural development and sleep patterns. While the significance of these findings is still debated, they raise questions about how ancient adaptations may continue to influence daily rhythms today. These subtleties, often hidden within the complexity of modern biology, remind us that traces of Neanderthals remain active in ways beyond archaeology. The mystery of cognition persists as well. Did Neanderthals think in ways entirely parallel to ours, or did their symbolic gestures represent something distinct? Cave art ornaments and burials suggest minds capable of abstraction and memory, yet the absence of a continuous tradition into later times leaves uncertainties. Scholars debate whether similarities between Neanderthal and Homo sapiens behavior reflect convergence borrowing or shared ancestry of symbolic capacity. The unresolved question of language hovers still. They may have spoken with voices shaped by large vocal tracts and hyoid bones similar to ours. Yet the absence of written or recorded evidence leaves us with silence. To imagine their words is to confront the boundary of knowledge where evidence gives way to speculation. On a planetary scale, their story mirrors the cycles of life itself. Species emerge, adapt, and vanish, leaving their marks upon those who follow. Neanderthals endure through multiple glacial and interglacial cycles longer than the entire history of agriculture and cities, yet their final disappearance underscores the fragility of even the most resilient species. The Earth itself continues its rhythms. Ice advances, seas retreat, and then rise again, indifferent to the survival of any one lineage. Against this immensity, Neanderthal persistence for hundreds of millennia becomes all the more striking, a testament to endurance within planetary forces far greater than themselves. Lesser-known archaeological sites extend their range and deepen the picture of their adaptability. In the Levant at Kebara Cave, a well-preserved hyoid bone suggests speech capacity. In Croatia's Vindija Cave, late surviving individuals provide crucial DNA sequences that confirm interbreeding. In Siberia's Denisova Cave, Neanderthal remains stand alongside Denisovan and modern human traces, a single site holding the convergence of multiple lineages. Each site contributes threads to the larger tapestry, yet none delivers final clarity. The incompleteness of the record itself is part of their legacy, an enduring mystery carried forward through fragments. The absorption of Neanderthals into Homo sapiens also raises questions about identity. In prehistory, categories are porous. Populations meet exchange genes and perhaps ideas without notions of fixed boundaries. Modern distinctions between species or cultures may not align with how ancient humans experienced each other. The interwoven DNA in our cells is evidence that boundaries were more fluid than rigid. To understand Neanderthals is to recognize that humanity has always been composite-shaped by blending rather than by isolation. From a planetary perspective, this blending reflects the nature of life itself. Just as rivers merge, climates shift, and coastlines change, so too do human lineages overlap and intertwine. The inheritance of Neanderthal DNA within billions of people today is not a relic, but a living continuity, a reminder that extinction is not always erasure but transformation. As the record of Neanderthals recedes into deeper time, their significance grows. They stand as evidence that humanity was once multiple, that close relatives shared the planet with us, and that their contributions persist invisibly. They remind us that survival is not guaranteed, even for populations that endure for hundreds of millennia. Their story underscores both the vulnerability and resilience of human life against the vast rhythms of Earth. In the stillness of caves, in the silence of DNA, and in the questions that remain unanswered, Neanderthals continue to shape how we see ourselves. They are not simply figures of the past, but companions in the long journey of human evolution. Their disappearance opened space for Homo sapiens to expand, yet their legacy ensures they remain part of us. As this final extension closes, what endures is a sense of continuity. Neanderthals live on in the structure of our bodies, in our responses to environment, and in the fragments of culture that suggest shared symbolic worlds. Against the vast scale of ice and time, their story becomes part of the larger human story, not as a separate chapter, but as a strand woven into the same fabric. In this recognition, the memory of Neanderthals rests not in what was lost, but in what remains quiet and enduring within us and around us. To follow the thread of Neanderthals further into reflection is to consider what their presence means for the story of humanity as a whole. Their lives are not isolated episodes, but part of a shared continuum of adaptation, survival, and change. When we trace their echoes, we find not only fragments of bones and artifacts, but reminders that human history is layered, plural, and entangled. Their legacy lies in both what they accomplished and what they leave unanswered. On the ground, their memory survives in the quiet of archaeological sites. A layer of ash on a cave floor tells of fire maintained across cold winters. A cluster of butchered bones shows not only hunting skill, but also the ability to cooperate in dividing resources. A pigment-stained shell or an eagle talon with cut marks suggests thought beyond the practical gestures that connect individuals to meaning. Each find is small, but together, they build the outline of lives lived with resilience and awareness. Lesser-known insights come from microanalyses of stone tools. Microscopic wear patterns reveal how edges were used to cut hide-carved wood or scrape plant fibers. Traces of residues show contact with adhesives like birch tar or with meat and fat. These studies bring intimacy to the record-turning stone into testimony of daily work. They show that Neanderthals are not caricatures of strength alone, but skilled artisans with knowledge carried forward across generations. The unresolved mystery that shadows their story is why after such endurance they disappear as a distinct people. Climate instability, small population sizes, and contact with expanding Homo sapiens all play roles, but no single factor is decisive. Some populations vanish earlier, while others persist in refuges for thousands of years longer. In this uneven pattern, extinction appears less as a sudden event than as a drawn-out fading. The question of why they did not endure independently remains open, a puzzle shaped by the fragmentary nature of the record. At planetary scale, their existence is one chapter within the broader story of hominins navigating the Pleistocene. Earth's climate oscillates in cycles of tens of thousands of years, glaciers building and retreating in rhythms set by the planet's orbit and tilt. Neanderthals endure across multiple of these cycles, adjusting their ranges as forests give way to steppes and coasts advance or retreat with sea level. They are part of a world shaped by forces beyond human control, yet they persist carving out lifeways in changing environments. Their disappearance is thus not a failure, but a reflection of the shifting balance between species and climate. The genetic legacy they leave shows that assimilation is as important as extinction. Modern humans outside Africa carry between 1 and 2% of Neanderthal DNA, a heritage that influences physiology to this day. Some genes aid immune response to Eurasian pathogens. Others shape skin adaptation to lower ultraviolet radiation. This quiet inheritance demonstrates that encounters with Neanderthals were not marginal but central to the story of human expansion. Their disappearance as a separate population coincides with their transformation into part of us. A lesser-known thread of this inheritance involves the human sense of smell. Genetic variants linked to Neanderthal ancestry affect olfactory receptors, suggesting that encounters may have subtly shaped how modern humans perceive and navigate environments. Such details illustrate how even intangible aspects of daily life today, responses to scents, rhythms of sleep, or vulnerability to certain conditions, carry faint echoes of ancient coexistence. Their cultural legacy is harder to measure but equally suggestive. If Neanderthals created cave art ornaments or pigments, then the boundary between them and Homo sapiens is thinner than once thought. Ideas may have been exchanged in zones of overlap, blurring distinctions between traditions. Even if their cultural gestures were independent, they show parallel developments of symbolic thought. In both scenarios, Neanderthals expand our understanding of what it means to be human, to make meaning, to decorate, to remember. The planetary view underscores their significance. Neanderthals endure for more than 300,000 years, far longer than any modern civilization. Measured against this span, our own cultural and technological achievements are brief. Their persistence across such vast time demonstrates that intelligence and resilience need not manifest in monumental architecture or cities. Survival through shifting climates and environments is itself an accomplishment of scale. Their story reminds us that endurance is as meaningful as innovation. As reflection deepens, what emerges is continuity rather than rupture. Neanderthals vanish, but not completely. Their genes persist in billions of people, their tools remain in caves and sediments, and their mysteries continue to shape research and imagination. They are part of us in body landscape and memory. Their presence teaches that humanity has never been solitary, but always plural, always shaped by contact and convergence. As this extended section draws to stillness, the image of Neanderthal shifts from one of disappearance to one of transformation. They are not erased, but woven into the fabric of modern humanity. In the vastness of Earth's rhythms, their legacy remains quiet but enduring. Theirs is a story without a sharp ending, carried forward in fragments of pigment, in lines of DNA, and in the questions we continue to ask. In this way, they persist, companions in deep time, their shadows and voices faint, but never fully gone.